My wife cheated on me with her ex-lover 6 months after our wedding and ended up in the hospital. Everyone asks me to forgive her, but my decision to leave her is irrevocable. You know how they say hindsight's 20/20? Well, let me tell you something. When you're living in what feels like a fairy tale, you don't exactly go looking for cracks in the foundation. My name's Marcus Reed, and 6 months ago, I was absolutely convinced I'd hit the jackpot in the love department. After what felt like a lifetime of dating disasters and relationships that went up in flames faster than a 4th of July barbecue, I met her. Ava Grayson. Man, where do I even start with Ava? Picture this. 5'6", auburn hair that caught the sunlight just right, and these green eyes that could make you forget your own name. But it wasn't just her looks that got me. Hell, I'd learned the hard way that pretty faces could hide ugly truths. No, what really drew me in was how smart she was. We'd sit up until 2 in the morning talking about everything from politics to our favorite childhood cartoons, and she'd always surprise me with some insight I'd never considered. She made me feel like I was the funniest, most interesting guy in the world, and after years of feeling like damaged goods, that was exactly what I needed to hear. The whole thing started at a coffee shop downtown. Cliché as hell, I know, but sometimes life writes itself like a rom-com. I was nursing my 3rd espresso of the day, trying to wrap my head around some quarterly reports, when she walked up and asked if she could borrow my phone charger. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, we were deep in conversation about whether pineapple belongs on pizza. She was team pineapple, I was firmly against it, but I was willing to negotiate. We dated for 8 months before I popped the question, and looking back, maybe that should have been a red flag. Moving too fast, getting swept up in the romance of it all. But damn, when you think you've found the one, 8 months feels like forever. I proposed on a random Tuesday evening in her apartment. No fancy restaurant or elaborate setup, just me getting down on one knee in her living room while she was wearing sweatpants and watching Netflix. She said yes before I even finished asking, tears streaming down her face, and I swear I felt like I could conquer the world. Our wedding was perfect in that small, intimate way that actually matters. None of that overpriced, stress-inducing circus that some couples put themselves through. Just us, our families, and a handful of close friends gathered under this massive oak tree in her parents' backyard. Her dad, who'd been skeptical of me at first, can't blame the guy. His little girl had been through some rough patches with guys before, walked her down this makeshift aisle while her mom dabbed at her eyes with tissues. I stood there in my best suit, watching this incredible woman choose me, choose us, and I honestly thought I might pass out from sheer happiness. The honeymoon phase? Let me tell you, it was everything they crack it up to be, and then some. We'd wake up on Saturday mornings and spend hours just talking in bed, making plans for our future like we were mapping out some grand adventure. We talked about kids, maybe 2, definitely not more than 3, because, let's be real, college tuition is insane these days. We dreamed about buying a house with a big backyard where we could host barbecues and watch our future kids play. Hell, we even planned out vacations we wanted to take. Italy for our 5th anniversary, maybe Australia for our 10th. 6 months in, and I was still walking around with this stupid grin on my face. My buddies at work started calling me the newlywed because I couldn't shut up about how great married life was. I'd catch myself doing cheesy stuff like buying her favorite flowers just because it was Tuesday, or surprising her with takeout from that Thai place she loved when she'd had a rough day at the office. She worked in marketing for some tech startup, and she was always stressed about campaigns and deadlines. So I tried to be the supportive husband who made her life a little easier. We didn't have kids yet, but we weren't in any rush. We were still getting to know each other as husband and wife, still figuring out whose turn it was to take out the trash and who was better at remembering to pay the electric bill. Spoiler alert, it was her. We were building something solid, something real, and I was grateful every single day that I'd found someone who made me want to be better than I was. Then came that Monday morning that would change everything, though I didn't know it at the time. Ava came downstairs while I was making coffee, already dressed for work in this sharp blue dress that made her eyes pop. She wrapped her arms around me from behind while I stood at the counter, and I remember thinking how lucky I was to start every day like this. "Hey babe," she said, and there was something in her voice, maybe nervousness, maybe excitement, I couldn't tell. "I've got some news about work." I turned around in her arms, raising an eyebrow. Good news or bad news? Good news, I think, she said, but she wasn't quite meeting my eyes. They want me to go on a short business trip. Just a few days, maybe a week tops. Some client meetings in Chicago. I felt a little disappointed. We had plans that weekend to check out this new brewery that had opened up across town, but I was also proud of her. Work trips meant they trusted her with important stuff, and Ava had been working her ass off to prove herself at that company. That's awesome, babe, I said, kissing her forehead. When do you leave? Thursday morning. I'll probably be back by the weekend, maybe Sunday at the latest. I nodded, already missing her even though she hadn't left yet. I'll hold down the fort here. Maybe I'll finally get around to fixing that leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. She laughed, that genuine, musical laugh that had made me fall for her in the first place. My handy husband, she said, straightening my tie even though it was perfectly fine. What would I do without you? Thursday morning came too soon. I made her favorite breakfast, scrambled eggs with that fancy cheese she liked and fresh coffee with just a splash of cream. We sat at our little kitchen table, and she seemed distracted, checking her phone more than usual. I figured she was just nervous about the meetings. When it was time for her to leave, I walked her to the door with her suitcase. She'd packed light, just a small rolling bag and her laptop case. I wrapped her in a hug that lasted maybe a little too long, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and trying to memorize the feeling of her in my arms. Miss me while I'm gone, she said against my chest. Always do, I replied, and I meant it. I kissed her goodbye on our front porch, watching as she loaded her stuff into her car. She waved as she backed out of the driveway, and I stood there until her taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I went back inside to our quiet house, already counting down the days until she'd be home. If I'd known that kiss would be the last normal moment of our marriage, maybe I would have held on a little longer. You ever have one of those nights where you're just coasting through your routine, thinking life's pretty damn predictable? That was me Thursday evening. Ava had been gone for exactly 12 hours, and I was already missing her like crazy. I'd heated up some leftover Chinese takeout from Tuesday. Lo mein that was honestly better cold than when we'd first ordered it, and parked myself on the couch with a beer, flipping through channels like some bachelor who'd forgotten how to entertain himself. The house felt too quiet without her. No sound of her humming while she did dishes, no clicking of her laptop keys as she worked on some presentation, no random commentary about whatever reality TV show she was half watching. Just me, the leftovers, and whatever garbage late-night programming the networks were pushing. I settled on some documentary about serial killers, real uplifting stuff, right? And try not to check my phone every 5 minutes to see if she'd texted. She'd sent me a message around 3 that afternoon. Meeting's going well. Hotel is nice. Miss you already read hard. I'd responded with some cheesy joke about not letting any smooth-talking Chicago businessman sweep her off her feet, and she'd sent back a bunch of laughing emojis. Normal married couple stuff. The kind of text exchange that makes you smile like an idiot and feel grateful you found someone who gets your stupid sense of humor. I was just getting into the documentary. Some creepy dude from the 70s who probably would have been caught in 5 minutes if they'd had cell phones back then, when my phone started buzzing on the coffee table. The caller ID made me pause. Yvonne Grayson, Ava's mom, calling at 10:30 on a Thursday night. Now, Yvonne's a sweet lady, don't get me wrong, but she's not exactly the type to make random late-night social calls. She's more of a text during business hours kind of person, the type who still thinks calling after 9 p.m. is rude unless someone's dead or dying. My stomach did this weird little flip as I reached for the phone. Hey, Yvonne, I said, trying to sound casual even though alarm bells were already going off in my head. What's up? The sound that came through the phone made my blood turn to ice water. It was crying. Not just tears, but that kind of raw, desperate sobbing that comes from somewhere deep in your chest when the world's falling apart around you. For a second, I thought maybe I'd misread the caller ID, because this didn't sound like the composed, put-together woman who'd helped plan our wedding. Yvonne, I said again, louder this time, muting the TV with my free hand. What's wrong? Marcus, she gasped between sobs, and her voice was so broken I barely recognized it. Oh God, Marcus, you need to come to the hospital. It's Ava. The documentary was still playing on mute, some black and white photo of a crime scene flashing on the screen, but suddenly everything felt surreal, like I was watching my own life from outside my body. The beer in my hand felt impossibly heavy. The Chinese food containers on the coffee table looked foreign, like artifacts from someone else's life. What hospital? I heard myself asking, but my voice sounded weird, distant. Yvonne, what happened? She's in Chicago. More crying. And then, she's here, Marcus. She's at Mercy General. She's been. Her voice broke completely, dissolving into sobs that made my chest feel like it was caving in. She's been what? I was on my feet now, pacing across our living room like a caged animal, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might burst. Yvonne, you're scaring the hell out of me. What happened to my wife? She's been attacked, she whispered, and those 3 words hit me like a physical blow. She's in surgery. Oh God, Marcus, there's so much blood. The phone slipped in my hand, slick with sudden sweat. The room started spinning, and I had to grab the back of the couch to keep from falling over. Attacked. Surgery. Blood. But she was supposed to be in Chicago. She was supposed to be in some sterile conference room talking about marketing strategies and quarterly projections. I don't understand, I said, and I could hear the panic creeping into my voice. She's not even in town. She left this morning for a business trip. Silence on the other end, except for Yvonne's ragged breathing. Then, Marcus, just come. Please. She needs you. We all need you. I was already moving, grabbing my keys from the bowl by the front door, shoving my feet into the first shoes I could find. Which floor? We're exactly in the hospital. Emergency surgery. 4th floor. I'll be in the waiting room. The line went dead, and I stood there for maybe 3 seconds, staring at my phone like it might suddenly ring again, and Yvonne would tell me this was all some horrible mistake, some mix-up with someone else's daughter. But the screen stayed dark, and reality came crashing down around me like a building collapse. I drove to Mercy General like a man possessed, breaking probably every traffic law in the city. The streets were mostly empty. It was after 11 by then. But I still laid on the horn at every intersection, running yellow lights and taking corners like I was in some action movie. The whole time, my brain kept trying to process what Yvonne had said. Attacked. Surgery. Blood. But she was in Chicago. She'd texted me that afternoon. She was supposed to be in meetings, staying at some corporate hotel, probably ordering room service, and watching HBO before an early morning conference call. She wasn't supposed to be in a hospital in our hometown, fighting for her life, while surgeons tried to put her back together. The hospital parking lot was nearly empty, just a few cars scattered under the harsh fluorescent lights. I parked crooked across 2 spaces and ran toward the main entrance, my footsteps echoing off the concrete like gunshots. The automatic doors seemed to take forever to open, and then I was inside, hit by that distinctive hospital smell, disinfectant and floor wax, and something else I couldn't identify, but that made my stomach turn. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt like it took hours. I watched the numbers light up, 2, 3, 4, and tried to prepare myself for whatever I was about to see. But how do you prepare for something like this? How do you get ready to find out that everything you thought you knew about your life was wrong? The elevator doors opened, and I saw her immediately. Yvonne, slumped in one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs they put in hospital waiting rooms, her face red and blotchy from crying, tissues scattered around her like snow. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, and the expression on her face, pure anguish mixed with something that looked almost like guilt, made my knees go weak. Marcus, she said, standing up so fast she knocked over her purse, spilling its contents across the floor. Thank God you're here. I didn't help her pick up her stuff. I couldn't move. I just stood there in that fluorescent-lit hallway, watching this woman who'd become like a second mother to me fall apart in front of my eyes, and felt my entire world shift off its axis. Tell me what happened, I said, and my voice came out flat, emotionless. Tell me everything. Yvonne looked like she'd aged 10 years in the space of however long she'd been sitting in that waiting room. Her usually perfect hair was a mess, strands sticking to her tear-stained cheeks, and her hands were shaking as she bent down to gather up the contents of her purse. Lipstick, mints, crumpled tissues, all scattered across that sterile hospital floor like debris from a car wreck. The doctors said she's stable, she said without looking up at me, her voice hollow and mechanical, like she was reading from a script she'd memorized. She lost a lot of blood, but they got the bleeding stopped. She's going to make it, Marcus. She's going to be okay. I wanted to feel relief at those words, wanted that knot in my chest to loosen up, but something about the way Yvonne was avoiding my eyes kept me on edge. There was more to this story, and whatever it was, she didn't want to tell me. Where was she? I asked, crossing my arms over my chest. You still haven't explained why she's here instead of Chicago. Yvonne finally stood up, clutching her purse against her chest like a shield. She wasn't in Chicago, Marcus. She never left town. The words hit me like a slap across the face. What do you mean she never left town? I watched her drive away this morning. She had meetings. She packed a bag. I don't know about any of that, Yvonne said quickly, and now I could hear the lie in her voice, see it in the way she kept looking everywhere except at me. All I know is the police called me around 9:30 tonight. They found my number in her emergency contacts. Before I could ask any more questions, a doctor appeared at the end of the hallway, walking toward us with that careful, measured pace that medical professionals use when they're about to deliver news that's going to change your life. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with graying hair and the kind of tired eyes that suggested he'd seen more than his fair share of nights like this one. Mrs. Grayson, he said, looking between Yvonne and me. Mr. Reed, that's us, I said, stepping forward. How is she? Can we see her? Your wife is stable, the doctor said, and I felt some of the tension in my shoulders ease. She suffered multiple stab wounds, 2 to the torso, 1 to her upper arm. We were able to repair the damage, and barring any complications, she should make a full recovery. Stab wounds. Multiple stab wounds. The words echoed in my head like they were being shouted in an empty cathedral. Someone had taken a knife to my wife, had deliberately hurt her, tried to kill her. The rational part of my brain wanted to know who, wanted to know why, but mostly I just felt this overwhelming rage building in my chest like a forest fire. Who did this to her? I asked, and my voice came out rougher than I intended. Do the police have any leads? The doctor glanced at Yvonne, then back at me, and I caught something passing between them, some kind of silent communication that made my stomach drop. Mr. Reed, could I speak with you privately for a moment? That's never a good sign. Doctors don't ask to speak privately when they're about to tell you your wife's going to be fine and you can take her home tomorrow. They ask for private conversations when there's something they don't want to say in front of everyone, something that's going to hurt. Whatever you need to tell me, you can say it in front of Yvonne, I said. She's family. I really think it would be better if we spoke alone, the doctor insisted, and now I could see something in his expression that looked almost like pity. There are some additional details about your wife's condition that you should be aware of. Yvonne squeezed my arm. Go with him, Marcus. I'll be right here. Against my better judgment, I followed the doctor down the hallway to a small consultation room that smelled like coffee and disinfectant. He closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit down in one of those uncomfortable chairs that every hospital seems to order in bulk. Mr. Reed, he began, settling into the chair across from me. Your wife's injuries are consistent with what we'd expect to see in a violent assault. However, during our examination, we found evidence of recent sexual activity. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air get sucked out of my lungs, felt the room start to tilt sideways. What are you saying? The nature of the injuries, combined with other evidence we found, suggests that the sexual contact was not consensual. He continued, his voice gentle but clinical. We've collected samples for the police, and we've contacted a specialist who works with assault victims. I couldn't breathe. I literally could not get air into my lungs. My wife who'd kissed me goodbye that morning and told me she'd miss me, had been raped. Someone had hurt her in the most violent, intimate way possible, and then they'd tried to kill her. Is she awake? I managed to ask. Can she tell us who did this? The doctor hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth. I was gripping the arms of my chair so hard I thought the plastic might crack. What? We believe this may not have been a random assault, he said carefully. The location where she was found, the circumstances, the police have reason to believe your wife knew her attacker. The room went completely silent except for the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. My wife knew her attacker. This wasn't some stranger who'd grabbed her in a parking lot or broken into her hotel room. This was someone she knew, someone she'd trusted enough to be alone with. But she was supposed to be in Chicago. She was supposed to be in meetings with clients, staying at some corporate hotel, far away from anyone who could hurt her. Instead, she was here, in our hometown, with someone who'd nearly killed her. Where? I asked, and my voice sounded strange, like it was coming from someone else. Where was she found? The doctor looked uncomfortable. The police will have more details, but I understand it was at a local motel. The Sunset Motor Lodge on Route 9. The Sunset Motor Lodge. I knew that place, a rundown dive on the outskirts of town where people went when they didn't want to be seen. The kind of place you wouldn't stay at unless you were desperate or hiding something. I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. I need to see her. Mr. Reed, I think you should wait until. I need to see my wife, I said again, and there was something in my voice that made the doctor nod and step aside. As I walked back down that hallway toward Yvonne, my mind was racing, trying to piece together a puzzle I didn't want to solve. Ava hadn't gone to Chicago. She'd gone to a seedy motel with someone she knew. Someone who'd hurt her, violated her, tried to kill her. And the only question that mattered now was why. I looked at Yvonne, still sitting in that plastic chair, still avoiding my eyes, and I realized she knew more than she was telling me. A lot more. We need to talk, I said. I barely slept that night. Hell, I'm not even sure you could call what I did sleeping. More like lying in our bed, staring at the ceiling, and trying to make sense of a world that had suddenly stopped making any damn sense at all. Ava's pillow still smelled like her shampoo, and every time I caught a whiff of it, my stomach would twist into knots all over again. The hospital had kept her overnight for observation, which meant I spent the night alone in a house that felt too big and too quiet, jumping at every sound and checking my phone every 5 minutes for updates. Yvonne had promised to call if anything changed, but her promise felt hollow after the way she'd clammed up when I pressed her for more details about what she knew. I was nursing my third cup of coffee and pacing around the kitchen like a caged animal when the doorbell rang at 8:30 Friday morning. Through the peephole, I could see two people in business attire, a tall black woman with sharp eyes and a shorter white guy who looked like he hadn't slept much either. Cops. Had to be. Mr. Reed, the woman said when I opened the door. I'm Inspector Lewis. This is Sergeant Green. We're with the City Police Department. We'd like to ask you some questions about what happened to your wife. I invited them in, offered them coffee, went through all the motions of being a helpful citizen while my brain screamed that nothing about this situation was normal or okay. They settled into our living room, the same room where I'd proposed to Ava 9 months ago, and pulled out notebooks like they were getting ready to interview a suspect. First, we want you to know that your wife is going to be okay, Inspector Lewis said, and her voice had that practice calm that cops probably learn in training. We spoke with her this morning, and she's been very cooperative. She's awake, I asked, feeling a mixture of relief and something else I couldn't quite identify. Can I see her? In a little while, Sergeant Green said. Right now, we need to get some information from you. When was the last time you saw your wife? Yesterday morning. Thursday. She left for a business trip around 8 a.m. The words tasted bitter in my mouth because I was starting to understand that everything I thought I knew about yesterday was a lie. A business trip, Inspector Lewis repeated, making a note. Where was she going? Chicago. She said her company had client meetings lined up, maybe a week-long trip. I rubbed my forehead, feeling a headache building behind my eyes. But the doctor told me she never left town. The two cops exchanged a look that made my stomach drop. It was the same kind of look Yvonne and the doctor had shared. The look of people who know something you don't, something that's going to hurt when you find out. Mr. Reed, Inspector Lewis said carefully, your wife wasn't on a business trip. She was at the Sunset Motor Lodge with someone. Someone she knew. There it was. The confirmation of what I'd been dreading since the doctor had mentioned the motel. My wife who'd kissed me goodbye and told me she'd miss me, had lied to my face and gone to meet someone at a seedy roadside motel. Who? I asked, and my voice came out hoarse. Who was she with? Sergeant Green flipped through his notebook, found the page he was looking for. Julian Cross. Do you know that name? Julian Cross. For a second, the name didn't register, and then it hit me like a freight train. Julian Cross. Her ex-boyfriend from high school. The guy she'd mentioned exactly once, about 6 months into our relationship, when we were doing that thing new couples do where you tell each other about your romantic history. She'd called him her high school mistake, some guy she dated when she was 17 and stupid. I know the name, I said slowly. She dated him in high school. But that was years ago. She said it was nothing serious. According to hotel records, they checked in around noon yesterday, Inspector Lewis said. They'd been there for about 8 hours when the attack occurred. 8 hours. My wife had spent 8 hours in a motel room with her ex-boyfriend while I was at work, thinking she was in Chicago, probably worrying about whether she'd remembered to pack her phone charger. 8 hours of my marriage being a complete and total lie. What happened? I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. How did this happen? We're still investigating, Sergeant Green said, but based on the evidence and your wife's statement, it appears they had an argument. Things escalated. Mr. Cross became violent. An argument? Like this was some domestic dispute between a couple instead of my wife cheating on me with some psycho who tried to kill her. I felt something cold and hard settling in my chest, replacing the worry and fear I'd been carrying since Yvonne's phone call. Is he in custody? I asked. We arrested him at the scene, Inspector Lewis confirmed. He's being held pending charges. This is going to go to trial, Mr. Reed, and we'll need your cooperation. I nodded, but my mind was spinning. Julian Cross. 8 hours at a motel. An argument that ended with my wife nearly dying. Nothing about this made sense, but at the same time, it was starting to make terrible, crystal clear sense. Mr. Reed, Inspector Lewis said gently, I have to ask, were you aware that your wife was in contact with Mr. Cross? No, I said, and the word came out harder than I intended. I thought he was ancient history. She never mentioned him, never talked about him, nothing. More note-taking. More exchanged glances between the cops that told me they knew things I didn't. Things that were going to make this whole nightmare even worse. We'll need to examine your wife's phone, her computer, any electronic devices, Sergeant Green said. There may be evidence of their communication that will be relevant to the case. Evidence of their communication. Text messages, maybe emails, phone calls. Who knows how long this had been going on, how long my wife had been living a double life while I walked around thinking we were building something real together. Of course, I said, whatever you need. But even as I said it, I felt something fundamental shifting inside me. The worry and fear were still there, but they were being joined by something else. Something that felt a lot like anger. We'll be in touch, Inspector Lewis said, standing up and handing me her card. And Mr. Reed? Your wife is going to need a lot of support as she recovers from this. Assault victims often experience trauma that goes beyond the physical injuries. I took the card and nodded, playing the part of the concerned husband while inside my head. A voice was asking questions I didn't want to answer. Support for what, exactly? For getting attacked by the guy she was cheating on me with? For lying to my face and sneaking around behind my back. After they left, I sat in my living room for a long time, staring at the spot where we'd shared so many quiet evenings together, watching TV and making plans for our future. Plans that were apparently built on lies and deception. My phone buzzed with a text from Yvonne. Ava's asking for you. Room 314. I stared at the message for a full minute before responding. On my way. But as I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, I realized I had no idea what I was going to say to her. What do you say to someone who's been through hell, but put herself there by lying to you? What do you say to the person you thought you knew better than anyone, when it turns out you didn't know her at all? I guess I was about to find out. I never made it to room 314 that day. Instead, I found myself sitting on a bench in Riverside Park, about 3 miles from the hospital, with absolutely no memory of how I'd gotten there. 1 minute I was walking through the hospital parking lot, and the next I was staring at the river, watching the current carry leaves and debris downstream like it was washing away pieces of my old life. The thing about betrayal, real, gut-punch betrayal, is that it doesn't hit you all at once. It's like being stabbed with a dull knife. First there's the pressure, then the confusion, then the slow, dawning realization that something inside you is bleeding out, and there's not a damn thing you can do to stop it. Julian Cross. 8 hours at a motel. My wife, who'd stood under that oak tree 6 months ago and promised to forsake all others, had been screwing around with her high school boyfriend while I was probably sitting in some conference room, thinking about what to make for dinner when she got home from her fake business trip. I pulled out my phone and stared at Yvonne's text again. Ava's asking for you. Like I was supposed to drop everything and rush to her bedside, play the devoted husband while she recovered from getting attacked by the guy she'd been cheating on me with. Like I was supposed to hold her hand and tell her everything was going to be okay when my entire marriage had just been revealed as a fucking joke. My phone rang. Yvonne again. Marcus. Her voice was strained, worried. Where are you? Ava's been asking. I know what she's been asking. I cut her off. I got your text. Then why aren't you here? She needs you right now. She's been through something terrible. Has she? I asked, and I could hear the ice in my own voice. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like she put herself in that situation. It sounds like she lied to me, snuck around behind my back, and got herself into trouble with some psycho ex-boyfriend. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, Marcus, you don't understand. No, Yvonne, I understand perfectly. Your daughter has been playing house with me while fucking around with Julian Cross. The only thing I don't understand is how long it's been going on and how many other people knew about it. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. I stood up from the bench, pacing along the riverbank like some kind of caged animal. She made a choice. She chose to lie to me, chose to cheat on me, chose to meet up with some violent asshole at a sleazy motel. And now I'm supposed to what? Rush to her side and pretend none of that matters because she got hurt. She almost died, Marcus. She almost died because she put herself in danger to be with another man. The words came out harder than I intended, but I was past caring about being diplomatic. I'm sorry she got hurt, Yvonne, I really am. But I'm not going to stand there and play the supportive husband while everyone pretends this is just some random tragedy that happened to her. I could hear Yvonne crying on the other end of the line, but it didn't move me the way it would have yesterday. Yesterday, before I found out that my entire marriage was built on lies. Please, she whispered. Just come see her. Talk to her. She can explain. There's nothing to explain, I said, and as the words came out, I realized they were true. It's over, Yvonne. My marriage is over. I hung up before she could respond and immediately turned off my phone. I didn't want to hear from anyone right now. Not Yvonne, not the hospital, not the cops who'd probably want to schedule more interviews about my wife's affair with a violent criminal. I sat back down on the bench and tried to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. Go home to the house I'd shared with a woman who'd been lying to my face for God knows how long. Go to the hospital and play the concerned husband while she spun some sob story about how Julian had manipulated her. Pack my bags and move in with my buddy Dave until I could figure out my next move? None of those options felt right. They all involved me reacting to Ava's choices, letting her betrayal dictate my next steps. And I was done letting her control the narrative of my life. I pulled out my phone, turned it back on, and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Tom Mitchell, divorce attorney. We'd played poker together a few times, and he'd handled my buddy Steve's divorce 2 years ago. Steve had recommended him as someone who didn't screw around, someone who got things done without a lot of hand-wringing and therapy speak. Tom Mitchell Law Office, a receptionist answered. This is Marcus Reed. I need to schedule a consultation with Tom as soon as possible. Is this regarding a divorce proceeding, Mr. Reed? Yeah, I said, and saying it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. It is. We have an opening Monday morning at 9 a.m. Would that work for you? Monday felt like a lifetime away, but it also felt like a line in the sand. A point where I'd stop being the victim of someone else's choices and start making some of my own. That works, I said. After I hung up, I sat there for another hour, watching the water flow past, and thinking about the conversation I'd have to have with my kids. Milo and Sadie were both in college. Juniors at different schools, both doing well, both excited about having a stepmother who actually seemed to give a damn about their lives. This was going to destroy them almost as much as it was destroying me. But they deserved to know the truth. They deserved to understand that sometimes people you trust, people you love, people you build your life around, turn out to be completely different from who you thought they were. When I finally got home, the house felt different. Not empty. It had felt empty plenty of times when Ava was working late or out with friends. This felt contaminated somehow, like every memory I had of us together had been poisoned by the knowledge of what she'd really been doing. I walked through our bedroom, our kitchen, our living room, and tried to figure out what belonged to me and what belonged to the lie I'd been living. The coffee maker we'd picked out together at Target. The throw pillows she'd insisted on buying because they brought the room together. The framed photo from our honeymoon, both of us grinning like idiots on a beach in Cancun. In the kitchen, I opened a bottle of Jameson, the good stuff I'd been saving for our first anniversary, and poured myself 3 fingers in a coffee mug. Then I sat down at our kitchen table and systematically deleted every photo of our wedding from my phone. It took me 45 minutes to get through them all. The ceremony under the oak tree, the reception in her parents' backyard, the cake cutting, the first dance, the moment when I dipped her and kissed her while everyone cheered. 6 months of thinking those were the happiest moments of my life, and now they just looked like evidence of how completely I'd been played. When I was done, I finished my whiskey and went to bed in the guest room. Our bed, the bed where we'd made plans and shared dreams and talked about the kids we'd have someday, felt like it belonged to strangers now. As I lay there in the dark, staring at an unfamiliar ceiling in my own house, I realized something that should have scared me but didn't. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't heartbroken or devastated or any of the things you're supposed to feel when your marriage falls apart. I was angry, cold, focused, absolutely fucking furious. And for the first time since Yvonne's phone call, I knew exactly what I was going to do about it. By Saturday morning, the cavalry had arrived, and let me tell you, it wasn't the kind of backup I was hoping for. I woke up in the guest room to the sound of car doors slamming in my driveway and voices I recognized, but didn't want to deal with. Through the window, I could see Ava's entire family setting up camp on my front lawn like they were planning some kind of intervention. Her dad, Robert, was unloading what looked like enough casserole dishes to feed a small army from the back of their SUV. Her younger sister Casey was pacing around, talking animatedly on her phone, probably calling in more reinforcements. And Yvonne was standing there with that same guilty, pleading expression she'd worn at the hospital, clutching a bouquet of flowers like she thought some daisies were going to fix the fact that her daughter had blown up my life. I made coffee and stood at my kitchen window, watching this bizarre parade of people who apparently thought they had a say in how I handled my wife's infidelity. The irony wasn't lost on me. Where were all these concerned family members when Ava was sneaking around with Julian Cross? Where was this united front when she was lying to my face every morning over breakfast? The doorbell started ringing around 8:30, followed by persistent knocking when I didn't answer. I let them knock. I had nowhere to be, nothing urgent to do except figure out how to untangle my life from someone who'd made it clear that our marriage vows meant about as much to her as a grocery list. Around 9, my own phone started buzzing. Text after text from numbers I recognized, and some I didn't. Ava's family, mutual friends, even a few people from work who'd apparently heard through the grapevine that something was going down. All of them with the same basic message. Be the bigger man. Think about what Ava's going through. Don't make any hasty decisions. Hasty decisions. Like the decision to trust my wife when she said she was going to Chicago. Like the decision to believe her when she promised to forsake all others. Apparently, those were the only hasty decisions anyone was concerned about. The knocking stopped around 10, and I figured they'd given up and gone home. Wrong. 20 minutes later, I heard keys. Marcus. Yvonne's voice echoed through the house. We're coming in. I stayed in the kitchen, sipping my coffee and wondering if this counted as breaking and entering. Through the doorway, I could see them filing into my living room like they owned the place. Ava's family, a couple of our mutual friends, and, Christ, even Father Martinez from the church where we'd gotten married. They'd brought in a priest. Like this was some kind of spiritual crisis instead of a straightforward case of adultery. Marcus, Robert said, appearing in the kitchen doorway with that stern, disappointed look he usually reserved for discussing politics at family dinners. We need to talk. No, I said, not looking up from my coffee. We really don't. Son, I know you're hurting. Don't call me son. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I was past caring about hurt feelings. And don't pretend you understand what I'm going through when your daughter was the one who caused it. She made a mistake, Yvonne said, crowding into the kitchen behind her husband. A terrible mistake, but that's all it was. She loves you, Marcus. She's always loved you. I laughed, and it came out bitter and ugly. She loved me so much she spent 8 hours in a motel room with her ex-boyfriend. Yeah, I can really feel the love. That's not fair. Casey chimed in from the doorway. You don't know what Julian did to manipulate her, how he pressured her. Stop. I held up my hand, finally looking at them directly. Just stop with the excuses. Ava is a grown woman who made a conscious choice to lie to me and cheat on me. She's not some helpless victim who got tricked into an affair. She almost died, Yvonne said, and her voice cracked on the words. She almost died, And instead of being there for her, you're sitting here feeling sorry for yourself. That's when I lost it. Feeling sorry for myself? I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. You think I'm feeling sorry for myself? Lady, I spent yesterday finding out that my entire marriage was a lie. I found out that while I was working my ass off to build a life with your daughter, she was sneaking around behind my back with some violent psychopath. And now you want me to rush to her bedside and pretend none of that matters because she got hurt. She's your wife? Robert said quietly. She was my wife when she decided to cheat on me. I shot back. She was my wife when she lied to my face about going to Chicago. She was my wife when she chose to put herself in danger to be with another man. Don't lecture me about marriage vows when your daughter already broke every single one that mattered. The kitchen went dead silent. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, could hear cars passing by outside, could hear my own heart hammering against my ribs. But nobody said a word. Finally, Father Martinez cleared his throat. Marcus, I understand you're angry, but marriage is about forgiveness. Father, with all due respect, save the sermon, I said. This isn't about forgiveness. This is about trust, and you can't forgive someone back into being trustworthy. That's when I heard the front door open again, and footsteps I didn't recognize. Heavy, confident footsteps that belonged to someone who had every right to be here. My kids. Dad. Milo's voice carried through the house, followed by Sadie's higher-pitched, "What's going on? Why are all these cars in the driveway?" I looked at the assembled crowd in my kitchen, Ava's family, our friends, the priest, and felt something settle into place in my chest. My kids were home. My kids, who'd driven 3 hours from their respective colleges because they'd probably heard something was wrong and wanted to make sure I was okay. "Excuse me," I said to the room at large. "I need to talk to my children." I walked past all of them, through my living room where more people were gathered like this was some kind of wake, and found Milo and Sadie standing in the entryway looking confused and worried. Milo was 21, tall like me, but with his mother's dark hair. Sadie was 19, petite and fierce, with the kind of protective instincts that made her a hell of a soccer player. They were good kids, smart, honest, loyal kids who deserved to know the truth about what was happening. "Hey," I said, and just seeing them made some of the tension in my shoulders ease. "Come on, let's go upstairs. I need to tell you guys something." "Dad, what's with the crowd?" Sadie asked, glancing toward the living room. "Is everything okay? Is Ava?" "Ava's going to be fine," I said. "But our marriage isn't. And I need you to hear it from me before anyone else tries to spin this story." We went up to my home office, and I closed the door behind us. For the next 20 minutes, I told them everything. Julian Cross, the motel, the lies, the cheating, the attack. I didn't sugarcoat it or try to protect them from the ugliness of it. They were adults, and they deserved the truth. When I finished, Sadie was crying silently, and Milo was staring at his hands with that 1,000-yard stare he got when he was processing something difficult. "We're here for you, Dad," Sadie said finally. "Whatever you need." "Are you sure?" Milo asked. "About the divorce, I mean. Are you sure there's no way to work through this?" I looked at my son, this young man who still believed in second chances and the power of forgiveness, and felt my heart break a little for his innocence. "I'm sure," I said. "Some things can't be worked through, buddy. Some choices can't be taken back." Downstairs, I could hear voices getting louder, probably debating strategy for their next attempt to convince me to do the right thing. But up here, with my kids, I felt like I was finally on solid ground again. "So what happens now?" Sadie asked. "Now," I said, "we figure out how to move forward. The thing about betrayal is that it makes you question everything you thought you knew, but it also makes you hungry for facts. Cold, hard, undeniable facts that can't be spun or explained away or softened with tearful apologies." By Monday morning, after watching Ava's family stage their intervention and listening to everyone tell me what a good man should do in this situation, I realized I needed more than just the basic story the cops had given me. I needed to know everything. My 9 a.m. appointment with Tom Mitchell went exactly like I'd hoped it would. No bullshit, no attempts to talk me out of filing, just straight legal advice from a guy who'd seen enough messy divorces to know when a marriage was truly dead in the water. "Adultery makes this pretty straightforward in terms of grounds," Tom said, leaning back in his leather chair and reviewing the notes I'd given him. "The question is whether you want to go scorched earth or keep things relatively clean. I want to know what I'm dealing with first, I told him. I need to understand how deep this goes, how long it's been happening, whether there are other people involved. Right now, all I know is what the cops told me about one night at a motel. Tom nodded like he'd heard this before. You want a private investigator. I want the truth. Same thing, in this case. He pulled a business card from his desk drawer. Elise Varga, former detective, now works private. She's expensive but thorough, and she doesn't sugarcoat anything. I took the card, studied the simple black text. Varga Investigations, truth you can count on. No fancy logo, no marketing bullshit. Just a phone number and an address. How expensive? I asked. Expensive enough that you'll know she's not cutting corners, Tom said. But given what's at stake here, your assets, your reputation, your peace of mind, it's worth every penny. I called Elise from my car in Tom's parking lot. Her voice was gravelly, no nonsense, like she'd spent too many years asking hard questions and getting unsatisfying answers. Mr. Reed, she said after I'd explained my situation. I can meet you this afternoon if you want to get started right away. Fair warning, once you hire me, you're going to learn things you probably don't want to know. Are you sure you're ready for that? I'm sure, I said, though I wasn't entirely certain that was true. Her office was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a Chinese restaurant. Nothing fancy, but clean and professional. Elise herself was maybe 55, gray hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing jeans and a blazer that had seen better days. She looked like someone who'd spent a lot of time dealing with other people's worst moments. Coffee? She asked, gesturing to a pot that looked like it had been brewing since the Clinton administration. I'm good. Smart choice. She settled behind her desk and opened a fresh folder. Let's start with what you know for certain, then talk about what you want to find out. I told her everything. The fake business trip, Julian Cross, the motel, the attack. She took notes without interrupting, asking clarifying questions only when she needed specific details like dates or times. The affair started before the attack, she said when I finished. That much is obvious. The question is how long before, and whether this was the first time she'd cheated or just the first time she got caught. That possibility, that Julian wasn't the first, that maybe our entire marriage had been one long lie, made my stomach turn. But I needed to know. How long will it take? I asked. Depends on how careful they were, Elise said. If they were sloppy, using their real phones, meeting in public places, leaving digital trails, I can have preliminary results in a few days. If they were smart about it, could take a week or two. They weren't smart enough to avoid a violent psychopath, so I'm guessing they weren't smart about much else. Elise cracked what might have been a smile. Fair point. I wrote her a check for her retainer, signed her contract, and gave her everything she needed to get started. Ava's phone number, her work information, our home address, the names of her friends and family members. It felt like handing over ammunition to someone who was about to wage war on my life. But it was a war that had already been declared without my knowledge. One more thing, Elise said as I was getting ready to leave. Are you prepared for the possibility that your wife might try to contact you directly? Apologize, explain herself, ask for another chance. I don't think she will, I said. She's in the hospital, and her family's pretty focused on protecting her right now. She will, Elise said with the certainty of someone who'd seen this story play out before. They always do. And when she does, don't engage. Don't argue. Don't defend yourself. Don't try to get closure. Just refer her to your attorney and hang up. What if she wants to talk about practical stuff? The house, our joint accounts, logistics? Everything goes through lawyers now, Elise said firmly. The moment you start having practical conversations with her, you're giving her opportunities to manipulate the situation. And trust me, Mr. Reed, someone who's been living a double life for months is very, very good at manipulation. I left her office feeling like I'd just hired a surgeon to cut a tumor out of my life. It was going to hurt, and I wasn't going to like what she found, but it was necessary if I wanted to heal properly. Wednesday afternoon, Elise called with her first update. Can you come in? She asked. I've got some materials you need to see. Her office felt different this time, charged with the electricity of secrets being dragged into the light. She had a manila folder on her desk, thick with papers and photographs. How bad? I asked, sitting down across from her. Pretty bad, she said, opening the folder. But not in the way you're probably expecting. The first thing she showed me was a timeline, hand-drawn on graph paper with dates and events marked in different colored ink. It looked like something you'd see on a detective show, except this was mapping out the destruction of my marriage. They've been in contact for 4 months, Elise said, running her finger along the timeline. Started with Facebook messages in January, moved to texting by February, first in-person meeting in early March. For months of lies, for months of my wife carrying on with another man while I planned anniversary dinners and talked about buying a house together. Here's where it gets interesting, Elise continued, pulling out a stack of printed text messages. This wasn't just a rekindled romance between high school sweethearts. Julian Cross is married with 2 kids, and his wife had no idea this was happening either. She handed me the texts, and I read through them with growing disgust. Ava and Julian planning their meetups around his work schedule and his kids' soccer games. Complaining about having to sneak around. Making jokes about their stupid spouses who didn't understand them. Stupid spouses, I repeated, staring at a message where my wife had called me clueless but sweet, while planning to meet Julian at a different motel the week before our 6-month anniversary. There's more, Elise said, and her tone told me this was where things got really ugly. Julian Cross has a history of domestic violence. 2 restraining orders from previous girlfriends, 1 arrest for assault that was dropped when the victim refused to testify. I looked up from the texts. Ava knew about this. Hard to say for certain, but probably. One of his ex-girlfriends posted about it on social media last year, and Ava was connected to her through mutual friends. Even if she didn't know the specifics, she had to know he was trouble. So my wife hadn't just cheated on me. She'd cheated on me with a man she knew was dangerous, a man with a history of hurting women. She'd risked not just our marriage, but her own safety for the thrill of sneaking around with her high school boyfriend. The attack wasn't random, I said, more to myself than to Elise. No, she confirmed. Based on the timeline and the evidence, this was always going to end badly. Men like Julian Cross don't just suddenly become violent. They escalate. And your wife walked right into a situation she should have seen coming. I sat there staring at the folder full of evidence, the photos, the texts, the timeline of lies, and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness or a marriage that could be saved with counseling and forgiveness. This was a woman who'd made calculated decisions to deceive me for months, to put herself in danger for the excitement of an affair, to risk everything we'd built together for a man she knew was violent and unstable. What else do you need from me? I asked Elise. Nothing, she said. I've got enough to bury them both if this goes to court. The question is what you want to do with it. I thought about Tom's question from earlier that week. Scorched earth or relatively clean? Looking at the evidence of my wife's months-long deception, the choice seemed pretty fucking obvious. I walked into Tom's office Thursday morning carrying Elise's folder like it was a loaded weapon. Because that's exactly what it was. Ammunition for the legal war I was about to wage against the woman who destroyed our marriage. We're filing for divorce, I said, dropping the folder on his desk. And we're going nuclear. Tom opened the folder and whistled low under his breath as he flipped through the evidence. Text messages, photos, timelines. Everything laid out in excruciating detail. For months of lies, for months of calculated deception, while I'd been playing the devoted husband. This is solid, he said, studying the printed texts. Adultery, emotional damages, possibly even fraud if she was using joint accounts for these meetups. She was, I said, remembering the credit card statements I'd reviewed the night before. Dinners, hotel rooms, even bought him a watch for his birthday. All on our joint card while telling me she was working late. We can sue for emotional distress and seek full restitution, Tom said, making notes. Given the evidence and the circumstances, I'd say you've got a strong case for a favorable settlement. What about her employer? I asked. They covered for her absences, let her lie about business trips. That makes them complicit. Tom raised an eyebrow. You want to go after her company too? Damn right I do. Their HR department knew she wasn't in Chicago, but they backed up her story when anyone asked. That's conspiracy to commit fraud as far as I'm concerned. It's ambitious, Tom admitted, but given the documentation, we might have a case. Her employer's involvement could be seen as enabling the deception. We spent the next hour planning strategy. No alimony. The adultery clause would kill that. Full division of assets in my favor due to her misuse of joint funds. Emotional damages for the months of lies and deception. And yes, a lawsuit against her employer for their role in covering up her fake business trips. When do we file? I asked. I can have the papers ready by Monday, Tom said. Are you sure you want to move this fast? Once we file, there's no going back. I thought about the text where she'd called me clueless but sweet while planning to fuck her ex-boyfriend. I thought about the months of lies, the fake concern when I'd worried about her stressful work schedule, the way she'd kissed me goodbye before going to that motel. File the papers, I said, and make sure she gets served while she's still recovering. I want her to understand exactly what her choices cost her. Tom nodded grimly. Consider it done. Walking out of that law office, I felt lighter than I had in days. No more pretending to be the understanding husband. No more listening to people tell me I should forgive and forget. From now on, this was business, cold, calculated, and completely fucking ruthless. Just like she'd been with me. 3 weeks later, Ava was finally well enough to come home. Except she wasn't coming to our home. I'd made that crystal clear when Yvonne called to arrange the pickup. She could recover at her parents' house, surrounded by all the people who thought I should just get over her betrayal and play the supportive husband. The divorce papers had been served while she was still in the hospital, and according to Tom, she'd taken it about as well as you'd expect. Lots of crying, lots of demands to speak with me directly, lots of family members calling to tell me what a heartless bastard I was. I'd ignored every single call. But today was different. Today, she was coming to get her stuff, and I had one final surprise waiting for her. She arrived with Yvonne as her backup, probably expecting me to break down and take her back once I saw her looking frail and wounded. Instead, I had everything laid out on the kitchen table like evidence in a murder trial. Elise's complete report, printed copies of every text message, a timeline of her 4-month affair, and a sealed envelope from Tom's office. "Marcus," she said, standing in the doorway like she was afraid to come closer. "We need to talk." "No, we don't," I said, gesturing to the table. "Everything you need to know is right there." Her face went white as she looked at the papers. The text messages where she'd called me clueless. The photos Elise had taken of her and Julian together. The credit card statements showing exactly how much of our money she'd spent on her affair. She picked up the sealed envelope with shaking hands. "What's this?" "Your employer's settlement offer," I said. "Turns out companies don't like being sued for enabling adultery. They'd rather write a check and make this go away quietly." "You sued my company?" Her voice cracked on the words. "I sued everyone who helped you lie to me," I said. "Your company, your friend who covered for you, even the hotel where you had your little rendezvous. Actions have consequences, Ava. Something you should have thought about before you decided to blow up our marriage." She tried to grab my hand, tears streaming down her face. "Marcus, please. I know I made mistakes, but..." I pulled back like she was radioactive. "Mistakes?" I laughed, and it came out harsh and bitter. 4 months of calculated lies isn't a mistake. It's a lifestyle choice. And you chose him. He manipulated me. Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop. You're 28 years old, not some naive teenager. You knew exactly what you were doing every time you texted him, every time you met him, every time you lied to my face about where you were going. The kitchen went silent except for her crying. Yvonne stood behind her like a bodyguard, shooting me looks that could have killed. "Live with your choices, Ava," I said finally, "because I'm done living with them." By the time they left an hour later, half the house was empty. But for the first time in weeks, I could breathe again. 6 months later, I was sitting on the deck of my new condo, watching the sunrise over Lake Michigan and feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Real, honest-to-God peace that came from knowing exactly where I stood in the world. The courts had ruled in my favor on everything. No alimony. The adultery evidence killed that dead. Full division of assets went my way, plus damages for her misuse of our joint accounts. Her employer settled out of court for a sum that made my lawyer grin like he'd won the lottery. Julian Cross got 5 years for assault, and his wife had filed for divorce the day after his sentencing. As for Ava, last I heard, she'd moved to Portland to start fresh. Her family still sent me Christmas cards like we were all one big happy family, but I threw them away unopened. Some bridges you burn completely, and you don't look back at the smoke. I'd sold our house and bought this place by the lake. 2 bedrooms, modern kitchen, and a view that reminded me every morning that life could be beautiful when you weren't living a lie. Milo and Sadie spent weekends here, and we'd gotten back into our old routine of watching terrible comedies and arguing about who made better pancakes. "You ever think about dating again?" Sadie had asked last weekend while we were grilling burgers on the deck. "Maybe someday," I'd told her. "But I'm not in any hurry." And I wasn't. For the first time in years, I was content being exactly who I was, without worrying about someone else's agenda or hidden motives. I'd started coaching Little League again, picked up running, even learned how to make decent pasta from scratch. People still asked if I'd ever forgive Ava, usually with that sanctimonious tone that suggested real men should be bigger than their pain. My answer never changed: no, because forgiveness isn't about handing your heart back to someone who destroyed it. It's about letting go of the anger so it doesn't poison your future. And I had let go, not of the truth, but of the need for her to acknowledge it. I didn't need her apology to sleep well at night. I didn't need her regret to move forward with my life. I'd learned the difference between forgiveness and stupidity, between mercy and being a doormat. Some Sunday mornings, like this one, I'd sit here with my coffee and think about the man I used to be. The guy who thought love meant accepting whatever treatment you got, who confused loyalty with enabling bad behavior. That guy was gone, replaced by someone who knew his worth and wouldn't settle for less. The sun was fully up now, turning the lake into a sheet of gold. Somewhere across town, Ava was probably dealing with the consequences of her choices. Somewhere else, Julian was counting down the years until his release. And here I was, free from both of them, building a life that belonged entirely to me. It was the best revenge of all.